Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are and when you're listening and watching this 12-step big book step telephone workshop. My name is Herb and I'm an alcoholic. Please join me in the set-aside prayer. Open mind, open heart. God, please set aside everything that I think I know about myself, my brokenness, my spiritual path in you. For an open mind and a new experience of myself, my brokenness, my spiritual path, and especially you. Please join me in the serenity prayer. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference. Bill uses the rocket launch metaphor, rocketed into a fourth dimension. And I've indicated that steps 1 through 3 are the first stage of a 3-stage rocket launch. An experience of powerlessness, step 1, and a decision about power, step 2, and a decision for a relationship with power, step 3. That's stage 1. But we've been focused on the second stage for quite a while. We've been looking at inventory, step 4. It's probably the most challenging activity of the step process in terms of its reflection, its acceptance, its revelations, the work that goes involved, and the amount of help that we need to experience what at least the big book suggests as a process, as well as my background with each of the steps. Bill calls it instincts gone awry. In the 12 and 12, chapter 4, instincts gone awry. And I used that based on my background in biology and psychology to translate and understand the model that he uses in the big book. Instincts, primal instincts of survival, fight, flight, and freeze, can then be translated into the emotional reactions that come from those biological functions, those instincts. Anger, fear, and hiding, or translate into our vocabulary, dishonesty. Now, the big book's model is resentment and fear and sex. Resentment is anger that's held for a long period of time. You define what long means. Long after the circumstances and the event that stimulated the anger, we hold the energy of negativity of the anger. It's called resentment, re-feeling the anger. And it might be days, weeks, months, decades in some of our cases. And fear, Bill suggests, is like a corroding thread. It's so interwoven into the human nature. A reaction of running, flight, when we are threatened at our survival level. Now, he uses sex as the third component, obviously, because it's so huge an issue in normal life, everyday life, men and women, international. But I got underneath mine, and what I saw was dishonesty, the hiding of my motives, the repression of my beliefs and principles in order to get what I wanted. So I see the very correlation with those instincts that are in biology, physiology, for survival of the animal. Fight, flight, and freeze. Freeze meaning camouflage, meaning hiding, meaning dishonesty. And we spent some time last time looking at the concluding instructions that I have in the Way of Life document. Not from the big book, but from my experience and from the 12 and 12 and from the big book, kind of like wrapping it up, looking at some of the things that we didn't spend a lot of time focusing on, like the 7 capital sins, which is the suggested model in the 12 and 12, step 4. Not ingredients that I've got much experience with. I didn't need to do that from my standpoint. They did not resonate with me. They might with you, and I'm not dismissing them. I'm just sharing that I don't have a particular experience with them. Looking at various forms of dishonesty, especially secrets. Huge issue for the human being. Because it leads to the tension, that leads to the relapse, that leads to the addiction. The whole point of step 4 is to identify the sources of tension. That Bill suggests in the introductory comments on page 64, that we get down to the underlying causes and conditions. The exact nature of the source of the suffering. Now, of course, he says selfishness, self-centeredness is the root, and in the Way of Life document, you can see the schema that has selfishness, self-centeredness as the root, and then anger and fear and dishonesty and sex as the manifestations of the root, the fruit of the root, as well as secrets, guilt and shame I have on that schema in the Way of Life document. So we've reviewed a lot. And now it's time to take action. Bill says, we reveal it all now. The way I typically do a 5th step, I suggest people make an appointment, probably 2, 3, 4 weeks in advance of their expected date for their sit-down conversation. Because it takes a minimum of an hour, maybe up to 8 or 10 hours, depending on how extensive the step 4 is and whether it's the first time or whether you've done it before and this is more a summary kind of thing. I used to listen to the entire 4th step of somebody who wrote it before I had enough experience to understand that there was a lot of redundancy there and it wasn't necessary. So now I help them shape it so that it's under 8 hours. My target is under 8 hours, so that I help them shape the number of resentments. That's the primary key to the length of the step 5 experience is resentments, the column 3, column 4. And what I have people do is I have them read column 3 and then column 4. Then I have them read their fear inventory. Have what's written. I suggest they do not editorialize. They do not give context. They do not tell the story. They do not create the drama. That's not a time for this. This is not therapy. This is not that kind of catharsis, although it will be therapeutic and it will be cathartic. What I've discovered also as an icebreaker, because both parties are uncomfortable with this process. It's a very intimate process, this 5th step. I suggest you have an environment that's safe, that is not going to be interrupted. A private home might work if, in fact, there's not going to be people coming in and out, or animals that need to be taken care of, or phones that are ringing. It's really important. This is a very sacred time. I have the good fortune of having a retreat center available to me, and I arrange for a room so that we have guaranteed privacy. And also bathroom facilities that are close, and outside where people can get up and go out for a smoke if that's what they need, and or a walk or a little break, or some food, or maybe some coffee or some beverage. So if it's going to be more than 3 hours, if I anticipate that, I suggest the person bring liquids and food. And so it's a quite comfortable environment. That's really important. It could be a park, as long as you can have some privacy. It could be the beach, as long as you can have some privacy. It's really important that you not have the possibility of interruption or being overheard. Mostly it's a very emotional experience, primarily for the person giving their fifth step, but even for the person hearing the fifth step sometimes. We get connected to the suffering of the person, and the truth of the revelation just cracks me open sometimes. And so I suggest when we sit down that I read the first paragraph and then they read the second paragraph. I read the third paragraph, then they read the fourth paragraph. The benefit of that is we're reading material that we all know and we've all heard of before, perhaps even have prepared as, of course, part of the assignment to read and highlight it. But they're hearing their voice out loud, they're hearing my voice out loud in a very safe way. And it kind of settles us down. Plus, it reviews the instructions so that if there's any questions or comments that are necessary for the fifth step, they can be taken care of at that time. It takes 5 or 10 minutes. In that very first paragraph, Bill just does what I do almost every workshop, is a retrospective context. He looks back over his shoulder at where we've been, and he looks at the first step. What are the constituents of addiction? He confirms them right here. When you start, you cannot stop. When you stop, you cannot stay stopped. And he says either or, one or the other. In my case, it was both and. But it doesn't have to be. He says that right here on page 72. Of course, then in the second paragraph, he gives us the reason for our rigor and our doing this. Undefended, that's my word, it's not in the book. Completely open, completely vulnerable, completely transparent. That's a good word, transparent. Not in the book, but it is my experience and my suggestion for the approach to the fifth step. He gives us the reason. If we skip this vital step, we may not overcome drinking. We may not overcome our addiction. He doesn't have any black and white comments, but he's a huge warning here. And of course, it was the experience of the man who took me through the steps. I think I mentioned that earlier at the beginning of our time together, way back when we began the telephone workshop. The man had had 16 years of sobriety and relapsed and was out for 5 years. Did this work with another man after the 5-year relapse and was able to come back. And when I met him, he was 8 years sober. But he said he had kept a secret in his first year, in that 16-year sobriety. He had kept a secret in the first year. Now, he doesn't know the truth of the connection, but what he knows is he kept a secret and he relapsed after 16 years. He was adamant. When I met him at the door, he said, Herb, if you have anything that you're planning on, conscious of holding back, go home, because you're wasting my time and yours. Well, good morning, Jerry. And he had already been very clear about that, and I was very clear that I didn't consciously have any secrets. Just time after time, newcomers try to keep to themselves certain facts about their lives. And he says it's a humbling experience. But he's really talking about releasing and identifying this tension in us that is a cancer that will metastasize if it's not excised, if it's not surgically removed. As you remember, the awry group calls this work soul surgery. On page 73, he has the word thought in italics twice, addressing the possibility of delusion and obsession, encouraging us to have the attitude of humility and fearlessness and honesty. Telling someone all the life story, all is in italics, the big book's way of highlighting. An autobiography is not what the step 4 suggests here at all, but I'd be okay with an autobiography based on that word, all of our life story. In fact, it was my experience. My very first experience that opened up the door to my possibility of having a drinking problem was the question from the hospital that asked, what's your history of your relationship with alcohol? That was an autobiography, not a general one, but a very specific one concerning my drinking past. And it broke open the door for the very first time, looking back over 20, 30 years of my life and then connecting the dots, both in writing, but more especially in the revelation to a group of men in that hospital program, not my hospital program, my wife's hospital program. I was there to support her, and this was one of the assignments that I had. Writing it out and then reading it out. The parallel to the 4th and 5th step began my journey. And then in my first year of recovery, 1984, I did an autobiography because my step guide, my sponsor, didn't understand the steps. And that's what he asked me to do in step 4, was an autobiography. It was good enough to keep me around, but it wasn't good enough to change me because I didn't get underneath the script. I didn't get underneath the drama. I didn't get underneath the story to the exact nature and the causes and conditions, which is what the big book suggests. In 1988, I did that. Mostly with the instructions that I've given you, although I've added to those instructions experiences that I had later on with other step big book mechanics. They added insights and features and experiences and an approach to the suggestions that I hadn't received in that first journey. We must be entirely honest with somebody, he says on page 73. If we expect to live long or happily in this world, page 74. Notice he's not even talking about addiction. He's talking about unmanageability. He's talking about living our life. He's talking about the spiritual malady. Rightly and naturally, we think well before we choose the person or persons. Interesting. Person or persons. You can give your 5th step to more than one person. You can give part of your 5th step to one person and another part to another person. Look down at the paragraph below this one, and he says at the end of that paragraph, such parts of our story we tell to someone who will understand yet be unaffected. Such parts of our story. It may be that we have legal issues or some other kind of issue that's not appropriate for our sponsor to hear for lots of reasons I won't get into right now. At least in the United States, the hearer of a 5th step is not a protected person, meaning they can have a requirement to go to court and reveal on oath everything that they heard. And in fact, the 4th step itself in writing and any notes connected to it can be commandeered by the courts. And so from a legal standpoint, I suggest that people who are hearing fifth steps do not put themselves in any jeopardy legally. Lawyers and psychologists and priests and rabbis and ministers, those are protected people. So I will send people to those people if in fact there's any legal implications to any aspects of their history. I've not had a whole lot of action in that area, but I've got enough attorneys in my workshops that have been very clear about this approach. The rule is that we be hard on ourselves, always considerate of others. He also suggests that if in fact confession is one of your traditions in your religious background, perhaps you'd want to go to confession. I actually tried that in one of the journeys because, of course, as a person in a Catholic tradition, that's part of our overall experience. And I gave a 10 or 15-minute summary. The person actually, the priest who was listening to this was quite interested and asked me a lot of questions about alcoholism, and it was kind of an interesting conversation. I thought so at the time, and the following week, that priest showed up in our meeting for his very first meeting. Pretty interesting. A complete readiness to go through it at the first opportunity. Of course, in 1939, there weren't many people, 100 sober people in 3 cities, New York, Akron, and Cleveland. Today, that's not the issue. It may be more with people on this call because of the distance and the specialty of your addiction and fellowship. And I know lots of you have long distance relationships, meaning states and or countries for sponsors and step guides. But there's a plethora of people that can hear a fifth step competently. And that's what he indicates here. Make sure it's the right person who can keep a confidence and fully understand and approve of what we're doing. On page 75, when we have decided who is to hear our story, we waste no time. Bill uses the term discussion, and that's not my experience with, and not my recommendation or suggestion with regard to the fifth step. It's a reading of my fourth step. Very little discussion. In fact, I give arbitrary guidelines. The person who's giving their fourth step talks 90% of the time. I may talk up to about 10% of the time. I'm just a guideline, no rules. But definitely suggesting the dominant voice being heard is the person revealing their fourth step. We have a written inventory and we're prepared for a long talk. We read what we wrote. I really discourage much editorializing. It's usually an effort on the ego to have that person look good in my eyes, or to explain their nature or their behavior or their insight that they don't do that. No, I'm not interested in that. I want to hear what you wrote. We explain to our partner what we're about to do and why we have to do it. I'm reading this paragraph now to the person as part of the icebreaker. And I say, so what are you about to do and why do you have to do it? They have not been prepared for that question. Those 2 questions. Sometimes they freeze up during a headline. What are you here to do? But fairly quickly, most of them have been guided through the steps by me. And so they're prepared to say, well, I'm here to reveal all of the sources of tension in me, all of the courses of obstacles, the causes of the obstacles to my relationship with power. And why do I have to do it? Because my life depends on it. My life depends on it. We realize we are on a life and death errand. This is a very sacred work. I am always honored by their confidence in this. We pocket our pride and go to it, illuminating every twist of character, every dark cranny of the past, aka secrets. We're transparent. We shine the light into the darkness of our past. Any area of disturbance, discomfort, embarrassment that hasn't been talked about before by you, or if it has been talked about before by you with anybody, and it's still an area of discomfort and embarrassment, then I really suggest it's an area of tension and that you bring it to light one more time. And I stop there. And that's when I listen to the column 3, column 4, column 3, column 4, column 3, column 4. And I make notes. I have a pad of paper in front of me. And I tell them in advance that I won't interrupt them, usually. Sometimes, if in fact there's a nudge that they need in order to perhaps have an insight or have a connection or have a realization or see a pattern, I might do that. But I'm not there as a therapist, and I'm not there as a teacher, and I'm not there as a sponsor. This is not time to teach them how to do third and fourth column. That time is long past. If they're here, they read what they have, and it's good enough for them. It may not be good enough for me. I may see it as superficial and that they're not making the connections that I think they could make. Too late. That's not up to me now. This is from my standpoint. And these are just my approach, my experience, my opinions. I also don't want to prolong the fifth step. I want them to bring, so I make notes though, if there's something that I really feel important that they're ready to hear, then I'll make a note. And at the end of the resentment reading, when they're finished with it, it's usually anywhere from 3 hours to 6 hours. Because I shape it. Remember, I asked you to identify 20 substantial ones and at least one analysis of column 3, column 4 on everybody, maybe 3 on the most important ones. That shapes it. That puts a sort of a boundary, a container on it so that it doesn't get overwhelming and it doesn't get redundant. And it is sufficient in order to see the patterns. We review the notes and we do have a discussion about that. Then we probably take a lunch break if we haven't already. At 4 hours, we probably have taken the lunch break. And literally backed off and just sort of open the door and allow the breeze, and or go outside and sit at a table. Or maybe there's been bathroom breaks in between also. And then I have them read the fear inventory. Read the fear, why do you have it? Read the fear, why do you have it? If they've done the worksheet in the Way of Life document to see the turnaround, and they want to read it, I invite them to read that. Takes not very long at all to do the fear inventory reading. An hour, usual, or less. The sex inventory, similarly. No matter how busy people have been, how active they've been, and whether or not they've ever done sex inventory before, the answers to the questions are very simple, straightforward. And the most important question is number 9. And at some point during the reading, I might even suggest that they just focus on the answer to question number 9. Because everything else is really just leading up to that and work that prepares you for step 8 later on. Then they read the concluding comments, whatever they've responded to in terms of those final instructions. And certainly any secrets that they might have. And we go back then, once they have said to me they have read everything in their notebook, we go back to page 75. Once we have taken this step, withholding nothing, I begin reading. And I look at them and I say, have you read everything to me that's in your notes? Or did you hold anything back? They were not prepared for that question. I look them straight in the eye and I go silent. 30 seconds. It's a long time. Now, they've just spent hours in self-revelation, so they're usually prepared, if there's anything held back, to cough it out. About 5% of the people have an additional comment to make at that point. But then I ask a second question. The first one was, have you read everything that you wrote? The second question, it comes only out of my experience, is, have you written down everything that you're aware of? And again, another 30 seconds of silence. And again, about 5% of the people make a comment of some kind at that point. Very minimal number of people hold anything back because they've been prepared to be completely transparent. But the ego's tough. The ego's tough. And then I go on with the promises of the fifth step on page 75. We are delighted. We can look the world in the eye. We can be alone at perfect peace and ease. Our fears fall from us. We begin to feel the nearness of our Creator. We may have had certain spiritual beliefs, but now we begin to have a spiritual experience. Notice it's approximate. It doesn't confirm that you actually have one. He says there's a high likelihood, though, that at this point you're going to have an awareness of a significant change in your consciousness. The feeling that the drink problem or the addiction problem has disappeared will often come strongly. We feel we are on the broad highway, capital B, capital H. Very significant spiritual terminology. Very poetic, very mystical. We are on the broad highway. You see, there's no place to go if there is God. God is, and God is everything. There is no place that there is not God. And the destination is the journey. The destination is the journey. We feel we're on the broad highway, walking hand in hand with the spirit of the universe. Wonderful poetry. A great metaphor. Embraced by the spirit. Then I give them the final instructions. This is part of the fifth step. Returning home. Now, people may not be able to go back home because it may not be a place of quiet for an hour. They may have other people there. So I suggest they either stay at the retreat center or they find a park or they stay in their car for an hour. And I confirm it's a 60-minute hour. Carefully reviewing what we have done. We thank God from the bottom of our heart that we know God better. Very interesting comment. We have just spent weeks, months, sometimes even years doing a fourth step all about ourselves. And now we've just spent hours, multiple hours, talking about our fourth step, which is all about ourselves. And it says we know God better. In thinking about that, it seems that the fourth step removes the obstacles to my relationship to the sunlight of the spirit deep inside of me. So I have a more transparent relationship. I have a more effective relationship. Taking this book down from our shelf, we turn to the page which contains the 12 steps. That's page 59. Carefully reading the first 5 proposals. Bill doesn't like to use the same word in consecutive sentences, so instead of using the word steps, he uses the word proposals. As he does on page 60, he uses the word principles. These are synonyms for the steps. Carefully reading the first 5 steps, we ask. He's suggesting that we're praying, we ask, but we're in meditation. Carefully reading. We ask if we have omitted anything, for we are building an arch through which we shall walk a free person at last. Remember the architectural analogy he started in step 2 on page 47. The cornerstone, step 2, willingness. That's all. Willingness is the cornerstone, obviously being placed on the foundation of the first step. Building an arch through which we walk to a new freedom, and he confirms the next piece of that work in step 3, the keystone. That stone at the top of the arch that holds the entire arch together. But here we are in the 5th step, confirming that now we walk through the arch. Well, he never made any comment about building it or what the building blocks were. So I'm assuming the building blocks are the ingredients of step 4. Resentment and fear and sex and secrets, as I've indicated in the Way of Life document. Is our work solid? In other words, in step 9, the promises talk about painstaking. It has nothing to do with pain. It has everything to do with being careful with detail, paying attention to the detail, being thorough, not being perfect. For you out there who are perfectionists, and it's never good enough. It's always good enough. No, you have to hear me. It's always good enough. It may be better later on, but for right now, you do the best you can do, knowing that it's not the best that you can do. And it's okay. Are the stones properly in place? The ingredients to step 4, perhaps? Have we skimped on the cement put into the foundation? Prayer and meditation, the set-aside attitude and prayer? Have we tried to make mortar without sand? Have we left anything out? It's a meditation, a 60-minute meditation, not reviewing the book, not reviewing the 12 and 12, not reviewing your notes in your binder. Please don't do that. Do a meditation. What did I do in step 1? Oh, let's see. I looked at powerlessness in terms of my addiction with my body and my mind, my body with my allergy. What was my experience with that? My mind with my obsession and delusion. What was my experience with that? Meditating on the instructions and my experience and the discussion that we've had about that. And then the key to this first step and the key to the entire program is looking at the spiritual malady, the unmanageability, those bedevilments that are still currently relevant to my life. The addiction may not be. I may have abstinence and long-term abstinence, but I'm a human being and I still am unmanageable on my own power, and those bedevilments will manifest in my life on a daily basis, which I watch for in the 10th step. And then step 2, what is it that I really believe? What decision did I make, and is it real for me? And in the 3rd step, what decision did I make about a relationship to be put into an alignment? Do I believe that? Is that really part of my consciousness, part of my spiritual awareness, part of my daily practice? And then to take a look at each of the component parts of step 4 in a meditation, not reviewing your notes. You might do that in some cursory way, but don't get substituting reading or writing or any other kind of activity for the process of thinking and reflecting and praying and meditating, and allow this process to wash over you. And then I say to them, when they finish with that hour, get a good night's sleep, go out for a walk, have a dinner with friends, go to a meeting, whatever it is you do to kind of like detach and refresh. But then the next morning, please call me and we'll talk about your conclusion to the 5th step and the suggestions and assignments for 6 and 7. The assignment for next week will be number 19, step 6. Let's pray the serenity prayer. That is the prayer for dealing with reality as it is, and it's a prayer for wisdom. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference. Thanks, everybody.